with that being said, the New York Giants have a chance to draft a few players, and some of those positions, and even with their first pick at number 3, could be a defensive lineman, could be an edge rusher. So, Alex, let's begin with the edge rushers. We will go 5, or I'm sorry, I think I said, I did say it correctly, 5-1. We did rank 5 people at each position. We'll start with number 5 on the edge rusher position. Donovan Iziraku from Boston College, 6'2", 250 pounds, 2024, his stats included 80 tackles, 16.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 1 pass deflection. Summing his strengths up in short, his athleticism, length, football IQ, and technique, a guy that really just jumps off the line of scrimmage and is very athletic off the edge position. And 16.5 sacks will show for that. Just able to speed past offensive tackles at the edge of the O-line and get those sacks and get a bunch of tackles in there as well. So, out of Boston College, a school that maybe not everyone is familiar with in terms of the football programs that they do have there, but a player that definitely stood out was Iziraku. Hopefully I got that correctly, but that's who we have at number 5. Off to Alex for number 4.
Yeah, quick touching on Iziraku. Sorry, that's definitely a mouthful. As someone who goes to school in Boston, and BC is obviously the token football school here, just because no other school has it. So I am familiar a little bit with him, and he's definitely a guy who I think was probably very under the radar. Probably going into this season, but definitely had a really big season. He's a little bit undersized, like you mentioned, Josh. But in terms of like a guy who has all those traits and just natural instincts for sacks and for tackles, you just can't get better than him. And I think he's going to be a guy who's going to go a lot higher than a lot of people predict, is all I'm going to say quickly. But moving on now to number 4 with Mykel Williams out of Georgia, 6'5", 245, 21 tackles, 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 pass deflected this past season. In 2024, he had an ankle injury, missed 2 games. In 2023, he had an illness where he missed 1 game. He also had toe off-season surgery, missing spring practices. So some injury history there for Williams. But the main positives on him, he's got a great size, frame, and really long arms. And against the run, he's very good at the point of attack, able to control the block and extend with those long arms. So a guy who you're going to have already a very high floor in terms of setting the edge and in the run defense department. And we've seen flashes of those pass rush upside. And I think that's really what you're projecting for Mykel Williams out of Georgia. Josh, I'll pass it to you for number 3.
Number 3, a guy I think we talked about heading into the scouting combine.
I think it was the Senior Bowl. But he had a big Senior Bowl. Yeah.
It was one of the 2. Mike Green out of
Small
Marshall.
School guy.
Yeah. Number 3 on our list. 6'4", about 250 pounds. In 2024, had 81 tackles, 17 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. A couple accolades that Green got under his belt in 2024 was the Sun Belt Player of the Year, also a first-team All-Sun Belt, and led the FBS in sacks and in tackles for loss. So a very dominant year for the edge rusher, and someone, again, who stood out in the pre-draft trainings or things, whatever you want to call it, drills and stuff like that at a good Senior Bowl, as Alex just mentioned. So a guy to definitely keep your eye on, but a lot of NFL teams already now have their eye on him, especially how he's done so far in these pre-draft workouts. So heading into the draft, probably going to be a higher pick than he came into the offseason, or this pre-draft season in the winter, early spring months than that was projected at the time. So that's what I got on Green at 3.
Yeah, really great performance at the Senior Bowl from him. Was absolutely winning every one-on-one rep. And as a small school guy, that's what you got to do. Go to those, different pre-draft activities, whether it's Senior Bowl or Combine or Shrine Bowl, and really show out. And he's definitely done that and jumped heavily in many different draft boards. But still hanging on to that number 2 spot is James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, 6'5", 245 pounds. In 2024, he had 38 tackles, 7.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. A guy who definitely projects as a more traditional edge rusher, had a lot of production this past year in a tough conference, and played against some really good competition. And he's a guy, his arms are really long. He's got really good size, and he projects really well at the next level as well. In the run defense department, there is definitely some concerns that I've read about, and I think that's maybe a reason why he's a little bit in contention with 2 or 3 or 4 in the rankings here, but still holding on to number 2 for now. But unfortunately, still nowhere near the consensus number 1 guy in this edge ranking, and potentially number 1 guy in the entire class.
Absolutely, Alex. You set me up on a tee for Abdul Carter, the number 1 edge rusher in this year's draft, and the number 1 edge rusher that we can think of in the last few years out of Penn State, 6'3", 260 pounds. His 2024 stats included 80 tackles, 12 sacks, 23.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 pass breakups. Obviously, a 2024 unanimous consensus All-American player, the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, are a couple of accolades to read off that Abdul Carter has. But, this has been a guy in conversations who the New York Giants could possibly draft at 3. He's going to be in the top 5 of the draft. I think that's no debate there. It's just a matter of if he's going to go to the Giants or not. At this point, it's kind of, you would think, set in stone that it's quarterback at picks 1 and 2. So the Giants might have, or I'm going to say the Giants 100% will have the opportunity of, I know we don't want to say 100%
that's
of
crazy.
the NFL draft, but I want to say 100% that they'll have the opportunity of drafting Abdul Carter. And if you want to tell me I'm wrong and pull this clip up after, that's fine. But I think
it's possible. I wouldn't say it's 100%. I'd say it's like 50-50. I think the Browns could go either way.
No.
You don't think the Browns could take Abdul Carter? No. I think the Browns are feasting. The owner went out to dinner with Abdul Carter, for goodness sake. I think
that's great. I'm sure a lot of owners went out to dinner with Abdul Carter, Alex. I'm sure he was not the only NFL owner to do so, but the number 1 edge rusher is Carter. I'm sure you want to touch on him before we go to defensive tackles.
Yeah, I mean, he's a different level edge rusher from what we've seen, over the past few years. I think it's a little corny to say like the best edge rusher talent we've seen since, whoever. In this case, I'm going to say it anyway. I think he's one of the best edge rusher talents we've seen in years and years and years. And Josh is laughing at me because I just basically contradicted myself completely there. But I think in terms of what he brings, not only is the stats he's put up and the impressive numbers, but the attention that he attracts from his play, from his production, is really just as valuable. You don't see him often. Like, offenses in college were game planning their entire game plan around stopping Abdul Carter. And despite that, he put up 80 tackles, 23 tackles for loss, 12 sacks. So he's a guy, he was playing with one arm practically in the national championship. Like, he is going to give it his all. He clearly loves the game of football because there's not many players right now that go out there and fight through injuries like he has to continue playing. Obviously, there is the little concern with his injury right now. Of course, he's projected to be fully healthy by the time training camp comes around. That's the only slight blemish, but I can't imagine that's going to turn teams off considering the extraordinary talent he has.
The top 5 defensive tackles in the 2025 NFL draft. I started out last time, so I'm going to send it right to my co-host Alex so he can get the number 1 spot in this countdown. Alex, who do we got at 5?
Yeah, we got my namesake, Josh. Darius Alexander out of Toledo, 6'4", 310 pounds. In 2024, he had 40 tackles, 3.5 sacks, an interception, which is always impressive for a big guy, and 4 pass deflected. Positive was him. He has really, really good explosion off the line of scrimmage. Someone said that looks like he's been shot out of a cannon when he routinely beats guards. His initial movement, his havoc in the backfield, his very strong lower body. He's able to maintain leverage and can drive blocks very deep. And he's very, very effective both in the run department and in the pass rush department. So, again, another smaller school guy from Toledo, but definitely not a small man and definitely not a guy who you can overlook in terms of the defensive tackles at the top of this class.
Going from number 5 to number 4, we're going to a bigger school for sure and a better football school than Toledo is. No offense to them, but Oregon, the Ducks are a little bit mightier. Derek Harmon out of Oregon, 6'5", 310. This past season had 45 tackles, 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 pass deflections. Positives for him: displays thunderous hands that enable him to consistently win the leverage battle at that point of attack with offensive linemen. He's also a natural power player who brings elite upper body strength, definitely has core stability in there as well, and that makes him just a nightmare for centers to try and block him after they snap the ball. And guards also attempting to drive block against him. It's just not going to work against a guy who's 6'5" in Harmon. And that's what we have as our number 4 defensive tackle. Alex, what do you got for 3?
Yeah, going into our first of 2 Michigan guys on this list at the defensive tackle position, just previewing that a bit. First one being Kenneth Grant here at number 3 out of Michigan. Like I said before, 6'3", 339 pounds in 2024. He had 32 tackles, 3 sacks, and 5 passes deflected. He's got great size for an NFL defensive tackle, takes on blocks really well with his hands, and has the strength to definitely gain control of the block at the point of attack. And he's a people mover, and he's an O-line mover, and you see that in his film. And he's not a guy who's going to shy away from a battle against some of the top offensive linemen in the Big Ten, and he won't do that in the NFL as well. So you're getting a very feisty defensive tackle, a guy who's going to play every snap at 110%. And this Michigan defensive line, very, very good, despite their quite underwhelming season in the Big Ten in 2024.
Alex, okay, I'll let you talk about the other Michigan guy because that's just how the lineup works here. I'll go to number 2, which is a guy from Ole Miss, Walter Nolan. I feel like another player we talked about at some other point so far, getting ready for draft season. 6'3", 305 pounds in 2024. He had 48 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 2 pass deflections, an all-SEC first teamer. And the positives for Nolan: first step off the snap always allows him to consistently beat offensive linemen. So a really good first step for Nolan. And he's able to really kind of dictate those offensive linemen and their initial engagement off the jump, and shows up repeatedly against both not just run, but also pass plays. So that's very good of him. And then a natural leverage winner who just plays with outstanding pad level and core strength, and that allows him to control the point of attack and reset the line of scrimmage against those single block opportunities. Now, I feel like that's very consistent with this top 5. If you're a top 5 defensive tackle in this year's draft class, that core strength has to be pretty elite. And also the off the jump work. We saw that, or we read about that with the guards, with the edge rushers. What am I saying? We heard about that with the edge rushers originally. That's also with the top defensive tackles. I mean, these guys have to have a great first step, especially those edge rushers, but also the defensive linemen to squeak by and get to the quarterback, running back, so have, whatever it may be. So that is Walter Nolan at number 2. Alex, you have the second half of that Michigan D-line that absolutely dominated this season. And the number 1 defensive tackle in this year's draft is?
And it's Mason Graham out of Michigan, like you already hinted at, Josh. And number 4 on Daniel Jeremiah's big board in his 4.0, which I believe just came out today or yesterday, actually. So go take a look at that if you haven't already. He's a very much a top 10 solidified pick, maybe a top 5 pick. And in terms of his attributes, he's 6'3", 320 pounds, 46 tackles, 3.5 sacks, and 1 pass deflected this past season. Really impressive movement skills for a guy his size, really quick get off as well, and he can penetrate the line of scrimmage really quickly. Takes on blocks with a wide base. He has plenty of strength to hold his ground in one-on-one situations, solid versus double teams and combo blocks as well, which he did see a lot of given his success this season. And he's a guy who, while played alongside Grant, definitely stood above and beyond him in terms of the eye test, in terms of his impact that he made on that defensive line. And Josh, just thinking about it myself, thinking about him next to Dexter Lawrence, I mean, it is a very, very fun idea. Now, the Giants are not going to take him at number 4 would be my, I'd bet quite a bit of money on it, or at number 3,
Number
excuse
3,
me.
yeah, you got it.
But yeah, the idea of it sure sounds like a lot of fun and a very menacing defensive line with either one of these number 1 guys, right? Mason Graham or Abdul Carter. A lot of really nice talent here on the line of scrimmage in this draft class.